Hey, what is going on, everyone? And welcome back to Today Assets Report, the channel where we break down the biggest moves in finance, crypto, and everything in between, so you always stay one step ahead. If you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because today we are covering something that has the entire XRP community absolutely buzzing. We are talking about news so big, so potentially game-changing, that people across the crypto space are calling it one of the most important developments in XRP's history. So if you have been holding XRP, watching XRP, or even just curious about where this whole digital asset revolution is heading, you do not want to move a single muscle right now, because what we are about to get into could literally change everything you thought you knew about XRP's future in the United States. Let's just set the stage here for a second, because context is everything. For years, and I mean years, XRP holders have been through the ringer. They watched Ripple get dragged into one of the longest, most brutal legal battles the crypto world has ever seen. The SEC came in swinging, claiming that XRP was an unregistered security, and that sent shockwaves through the entire market. Exchange after exchange delisted XRP. Investors panicked. A lot of people walked away, but the ones who stayed, the ones who held on through all of that uncertainty and pain, those people are now watching something extraordinary begin to unfold, because right now the signals coming out of Washington are unlike anything we have seen before, and it is pointing in one very clear direction, and that direction has XRP written all over it. Now here's where it gets really interesting, and I want you to pay close attention, because this is the part that most people are sleeping on. There is a very serious conversation happening at the highest levels of the United States government about how America is going to position itself in the global digital asset race. And not just general crypto talk. We are talking about specific discussions around blockchain infrastructure, cross-border payment systems, and the kind of technology that can move money across the world in seconds with almost zero cost. Sound familiar? Because that is literally what XRP and the XRP ledger were built to do from day one. Ripple has spent over a decade building relationships with banks, financial institutions, and governments around the world, and now it looks like the United States might finally be ready to get serious about joining that conversation in a real and meaningful way. And look, let's talk about what has actually shifted in the regulatory environment, because this is huge and it directly impacts XRP. The political climate around crypto in America has done a complete 180 over the past year. You have lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who are now openly talking about passing clear, comprehensive crypto legislation. You have a growing number of politicians who are actively courting the crypto voter base, and that is a base that numbers in the tens of millions across the country. The days of regulation by enforcement, where the SEC could just sue first and ask questions later, those days appear to be numbered. And with the Ripple case having already produced a landmark ruling that XRP is not a security when sold to retail investors, the legal foundation for XRP's legitimacy in the US market has never been stronger than it is right now. But wait, because it does not stop there. Let's talk about what is happening on the institutional side, because this is where things get really exciting. Major financial players, the kind of institutions that move markets with a single decision, are paying very close attention to XRP right now. We are talking about banks, payment processors, and fintech companies who have been quietly watching the regulatory situation play out, waiting for the green light to move. And with clarity finally starting to emerge, the floodgates could open in a way that the retail market is not even fully prepared for. Think about it. When you have institutions with billions, sometimes trillions of dollars under management deciding that XRP is a legitimate, legal, viable asset class, the demand that creates is almost incomprehensible to think about. This is not a small development. This is the kind of structural shift that defines an entire market cycle. Now, I also want to address something that a lot of people in the XRP community have been talking about, and that is the idea of XRP playing a role in the future of US financial infrastructure. And before anyone says that sounds too good to be true, just look at the facts on the ground. Ripple has been actively expanding its presence in the United States. They have been hiring, growing their policy team in Washington, and engaging with regulators in a way that signals a company that is preparing for a much bigger role domestically. The technology is proven. The network is live. The on-demand liquidity product is already processing real transactions for real financial institutions around the world. The infrastructure is not hypothetical. It exists, it works, and it is scalable. The question was never whether the technology was ready. The question was always whether the regulatory environment would allow it to thrive. And that environment is changing fast. Let's also zoom out and look at the global picture for a moment, because this adds another layer of urgency to everything we are discussing. Countries around the world are not waiting for the United States to figure out its crypto policy. They are moving. Central banks are experimenting with digital currencies. Nations in Asia, the Middle East, and Europe are already integrating blockchain-based payment solutions into their financial systems. And Ripple is right there in the middle of it all, partnering with central banks, working with governments, and positioning the XRP ledger as a foundational piece of the next generation of global finance. Now, here is the key question. Can the United States afford to sit on the sidelines while all of this is happening? Because if America wants to maintain its leadership in global finance, the window to act is not going to stay open forever, and the pressure to move is building every single day. Here's something else that deserves real attention, and that is the role of XRP in the stablecoin and tokenization narrative that is taking over the financial world right now. The XRP ledger is not just a payment network, it is a full-featured blockchain that supports decentralized exchange, smart contracts, tokenized assets, and yes, stablecoins. Ripple has already launched its own stablecoin, RLUSD, and the early response from the market has been extremely positive. This matters because it shows that Ripple is not a one-trick pony. They are building an entire ecosystem, and XRP sits at the center of all of it as the native asset that powers transactions and liquidity across the whole network. When you start to understand the full scope of what Ripple is building and how XRP fits into it, the potential here starts to look less like speculation and more like a very calculated, very serious bet on the future of money itself. And speaking of the future of money, let's talk about what a world looks like where XRP is actually integrated into mainstream US financial infrastructure. Imagine a system where banks can settle cross-border transactions in 3 to 5 seconds instead of 3 to 5 days. Imagine a world where the billions of dollars in capital that gets trapped in Nostro and Vostro accounts, just sitting there as a buffer for slow legacy payment systems, can be freed up and put to productive use. Imagine the cost savings for businesses, for consumers, for governments. This is not a fantasy. This is what Ripple has been pitching to financial institutions for years, and it is what XRP was specifically designed to enable. The technology works. The use case is real. And now, with the regulatory environment shifting in their favor, the possibility of this becoming mainstream American financial infrastructure is more real today than it has ever been before. Now let's take a moment to talk about price, because let's be real. Everyone watching this has at least one eye on the charts, and that is completely fair. The fundamentals we just talked about do not exist in a vacuum. They have very real implications for what XRP could be worth as adoption accelerates and institutional demand grows. Analysts across the space have been revising their XRP price targets upward, and some of the numbers being thrown around are genuinely staggering. When you combine a favorable regulatory environment, growing institutional interest, expanding real-world utility, and the overall crypto market continuing to mature, the case for significant price appreciation is not just wishful thinking. It is rooted in supply and demand fundamentals that are actually shifting in XRP's favor in real time. How high can it go? That is the question on everyone's mind, and the answer depends on just how big this adoption story ends up being. Let's also give credit where credit is due, because the Ripple team deserves serious recognition for what they have built and how they have navigated one of the most challenging regulatory battles any crypto company has ever faced. Most companies would have folded under the pressure of an SEC lawsuit. Most teams would have scattered. But Ripple dug in, fought back, hired the best legal minds in the country, and ultimately came out the other side with a ruling that validated what the XRP community had been saying all along. That kind of resilience and institutional strength is not something you see in every crypto project. It is actually quite rare. And it is one of the main reasons why XRP continues to have one of the most passionate and dedicated communities in all of crypto, a community that never gave up even when things looked darkest. Now, I want to speak directly to the people who have been holding XRP through all of the ups and downs because this moment is for you. You watched the price collapse during the SEC lawsuit. You watched exchanges delist it. You probably had friends and family telling you to cut your losses and move on. And you stayed anyway. Maybe it was because you believed in the technology. Maybe it was because you believed in the team. Maybe it was just gut instinct. Whatever the reason, the story is not over. In fact, if anything, the most important chapter might just be starting. The legal clouds are clearing. The regulatory environment is improving. The institutional interest is building. And the United States, the most important financial market in the world, appears to finally be moving toward embracing, rather than fighting, the kind of technology that XRP represents. That is not nothing. That is everything. Let's also talk about what to watch going forward because staying informed is how you stay ahead. Keep your eyes on any new crypto legislation coming out of Congress, specifically anything related to payment systems, digital asset classification, and stablecoin regulation. These are the areas where XRP and Ripple have the most to gain from clear, fair rules. Also watch for any announcements from Ripple about new banking partnerships or central bank digital currency pilots, because those are the kinds of deals that signal real-world traction at a level that most retail investors do not fully appreciate until after the price has already moved. And of course, keep an eye on the broader macro environment, because crypto does not exist in a bubble. Interest rates, inflation, and global economic conditions all play a role in how and when institutional capital flows into digital assets. One more thing I want to highlight before we start wrapping up, and this is something that does not get nearly enough attention in the mainstream conversation about XRP. The XRP ledger is one of the most energy-efficient blockchains in existence. At a time when environmental concerns about crypto are very real and very much part of the political conversation, XRP's green credentials are actually a significant competitive advantage. It does not rely on energy-intensive proof-of-work mining. The ledger is fast, cheap, and carbon neutral in a way that Bitcoin and even Ethereum simply cannot claim. For governments and institutions that are increasingly sensitive to ESG concerns, this is not a minor detail. It is a feature that could genuinely influence which blockchain technologies get adopted at the institutional and governmental level. And once again, that puts XRP in a very favorable position relative to the competition. All right, everyone, let's bring it home because we have covered a lot of ground today, and I want to make sure the big picture is crystal clear. We are living through a genuinely historic moment for XRP and for the broader digital asset space. The United States is moving slowly, cautiously, but unmistakably toward a future where blockchain technology and digital assets are part of the mainstream financial system. Ripple and XRP are positioned right at the center of that future. The legal battles are largely behind them. The technology is proven, the global partnerships are real, and the regulatory winds are shifting in a direction that could unlock a level of institutional adoption that changes everything. If you are not paying attention to XRP right now, you might want to start. Because if even a fraction of what is being set up here actually comes to fruition, this is going to be one of those stories people talk about for a very long time. As always, thank you so much for watching Today Assets Report. Stay sharp, stay informed, and we will see you in the next one.